Hopefully my furnace doesn't go off while I'm recording. So on my first video about this Dr. Seuss quilt, I share how I kind of organize it and just collect the shirts as I can. But I've never done a quilt beginning to end with a video. So this is part 2. Now once I've got them kind of where I want them, I start cutting them. And I do the shortest shirts on the same row if I can, because these couple were shorter kid shirts. And then anything that's going to be bulky, this one has all the tags on it, and it's a cute square, but it's going to be bulky, so with all those sewed on. So that one I put on the bottom, and then I usually sign my name on it when I do a tag quilt. And this is only if you have cute tags that are all the same. So like any kind of, I've done this on comic book quilts, I've done it on Dr. Seuss, on Winnie the Pooh, Warner Brothers, Snoopy, any kind of registered trademark. That kind of is a cute way to use the tags and make it fun. But the rest of them you don't want kind of bulky. I've showed also on the other ones, like we'll use pocket ones, but we'll like sweatshirts with pockets, and we're using the pockets but we're putting them on the edges so they're not bulky in the middle of the quilt. The other thing you need to kind of be aware of is if the shirt is a shirt that goes all the way from the bottom of the top of the shirt, some of these are that way. Sometimes you have, if it's a V-neck, you have to sew in a piece, because if I didn't sew in a second piece here, then I would only have one thickness of the shirt and the tag would show. So I turn the back of the shirt, I cut them out separately, turn the back of the shirt upside down so that the tag doesn't show through, and then I use one of the sleeves and cut off a piece that will fit in the V. Now I've already sewn this one, similar thing. The kite came up higher than the neckline. So, if you look close, you can see the seams, but I'm standing back, a foot or two, you can't really see the seams. But I had to stick an extra piece in there, and you can see I just flipped the tag from the back around. So that was the first one, and then, so you just cut a piece that's about as big as you don't want it down here, because then the fringes you can feel them, and it gets lumpy and bumpy, and then once you start washing it or wearing it, you'll have marks where the inside piece is. So you just want to cut it big enough that it's inside this neckline piece, and then stitch it so that there's double thickness on all t-shirts. Need a back double thickness, because if not, when you pull it, it'll rip the thread and stretch it. So that one has been sewn in, this one has not been sewn in. Another one I already sewed in was this one. Now I didn't have to do that, but if I wanted the shirt to be long enough, then you need to sew one in. Now this one I opted to go with white because it kind of draws attention to the fish. I didn't want it, I could have done in black, like on this one I'm doing black. You can do it the same color as you see on the Cat in the Hat, or you can go with the contrasting color. Doesn't really matter, it's kind of what I have handy at the time, because I don't really think it makes or breaks the quilt having a different color in there. So then once you've got it all figured out, you cut the rows to the height they need to be. So all the shirts on that row need to be cut to the same height. So you want to not stick something like this one that has full length bottom to the top with one that's short, a children's shirt. It might not have, so you'd have to cut some of the shirt off. So you want to kind of pay attention to that when you're putting your rows out. Also, I talk on the other one about not putting similar colors together, so you don't have a cluster of blue or a cluster of green. You want to kind of spread them out. So size is an issue and color is an issue. And then once you've got it where you want it, you start cutting the rows. So the first thing you do is you cut the height, and then you measure it against the back. So I have a big stack of sheets here that I just purchased. I wash them. I buy them at secondhand stores new if they're in the bag. Like you can see, there's a cute set there. It's just not a king, so I can't use that cute orange one. But she wanted a king. She decided she went from 2 twins to a king. So we're going to do that, and I've got the back. But you need to make sure that you don't, when you're cutting the width of the shirts, if I cut these ones in thin, like these ones were just girls cut, so they were thinner anyway, so I had to cut them thin. But if I had cut all the other ones thin, I would have had a really skinny row, and then some of these other ones that have really big patterns on them would have been a wider row. And so you have to pay attention when you're cutting, to do it at first, I cut them all as wide as possible. You can see this one. I cut the sleeves, so I cut it to the farthest edge on the seam that I can, and including the seams of the shirt arms. And then once I'm cutting down, this one I can't really cut in thin because it's got all these things on it. And some of these other ones you can't really cut in thin, or you're cutting into the pattern. But on this one, this row is going to be the thinnest row. This one is I can cut in now on this one and make it thinner. So you have to start with the row that's the shortest, the shirt on the row that's the shortest, and then cut all of the rest of them to that height. So now I've got all of them cut to the right height, all the way up. And the next thing you're going to do is measure it against the back of the sheet that you're going to use. I use a sheet so I don't have to seam on the back of the quilt. You can, if you can find huge pieces of fabric, great. Otherwise, use a sheet. That way there's no seam down the middle if you're doing a king, or larger pieces of quilts. So she wants a king, so I measured it against it, and it's about exactly a king now. But I want to put a strip of these pants on either side of the row. We were going to go alternating on the last quilt. If you watch that, you can see that I'm not doing that now. I'm going to go a strip of each down both sides so that it's kind of like a finishing edge on the edges. So I shifted them around, moved a few of them. If you watch the last video of this one, you'll notice I've moved a few of them, and now we're going to do a strip of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them all in thinner, and I like if I can cut off most of the arm. So on this one I could cut in a couple inches. On the other ones you can't really cut the arm off, or you go into like this one is still an inch in on one side versus the other. So it just depends on the shirt. Sometimes I leave the arm seam in if it's a thinner shirt. Otherwise I'll cut it off if I can when I'm fitting it to the width of the quilt that I want. So the second thing on here is cut it in width-wise after you've cut it height-wise. Double check and sew before you start sewing any of the squares together. You have to sew all of the odd things that need to be sewn on. So I had one that I sewed two together. Now this one, she wanted Seussical on the quilt, but she doesn't want it to have its own square, so I just put it on the bottom here. So if it, when you sew them on, they get a little bit lumpy sometimes. So I just put that on the bottom corner, and then this one, obviously I'm going to sew these all on before I start sewing the squares together. So then that's the next step. So cut them down height-wise, then cut them down width-wise. Make sure that all the rows, you got to start with the thinnest row. So I'm going to start with this one because all of these shirts are quite thin, and these ones are thick, wider, so I can kind of measure the row. That row, all the other rows are going to be measured to the thinnest row. And then you're going to cut those rows to match your thinnest row. And then once you've got them all, then you have to measure that they're all exact same length. So you don't want to cut just the row out here and that row out there without measuring them against each other. So I lay them out on the floor like this, measure them all, and make sure that I'm cutting them in to measure equally to the skinniest rows. So anyway, hopefully that's clear. If not, feel free to ask questions. But for now, I think I'm doing, I've explained it enough. So then once I've got them all cut out and measured exactly, I'll show you again. And then I've got a video where I show sewing them together, but I'm going to try and do it all on one quilt so you can see it beginning to finish. Thanks for watching. Check out my blog. I put pictures on there as well. It's thesecretisgratitude.com. And my YouTube channel has lots of videos on t-shirt quilts as well as my blog. Thanks for watching and have a blessed day.